happen, because it did happen. And, you can believe me or not believe me. I'm not trying to convince you, but that's what happened to me. So I'm pretty solid with my faith on that.
And that's interesting too, because I'm not really religious. Billy's not really religious, but we're both kind of raised in it for a bit. Billy longer than I was. And, and I always questioned. I was like, was Jesus real, or was it based on Mithra and all these other, because I would just read these ancient books and stuff like that. And the more I get older, the more I get convinced that there's a possibility that obviously there's benevolent forces also interacting, but I definitely believe that there's negative ones because I've seen them, right? And it's interesting because I got a question about, because I like, there's people that point to like Jesus it was Ben Yosef, right? So do you know where we get the name Jesus from? Because I've heard that like that's not actually his actual name. And I've always thought, like, why do we use that name rather than Ben Joseph?
Well, God's name is basically YH. It looks like VH, and it's the letters being Yod He Vav He or something like that. And then you can pronounce that if you want as Yahweh or Yahuwah. And there's many ways through like Hebrew, which, by the way, is actually quite a new language. The modern Hebrew. It's not as old as you think it is. So when people say his real name is Yeshua and all these type of things, I'm dubious about that as well. Now, they say Jesus is the transliterations of Iesous, which is just the Greek, and everyone was speaking Greek, including Paul back then, so that's just a transliteration of Joshua into English as well. So his actual name in English is Joshua, technically not Jesus, but Jesus is just an anglicized version of Iesous, which is, what his name would have been in Greek, and that's it really. I don't think it's as deep as people make it out to be. Saying, but the letter J didn't exist until this point. It's actually Hail Zeus, and it's not. That's a leap. To get there, just because
well, it would have been intention too, right? Because either way, when you're in those maybe circumstances, or you're like in those situations, or you're at church, or in somewhere where you're like wanting to reach out to the whatever entity that Jesus is, the Son of God, you're giving the intention anyway, so it wouldn't probably matter too much.
No, I think language is language. Every language calls Jesus by a different name within their own tongue, and that's fine. I think small mouth noises are not a limitation for God. I think if you're talking, when you pray to Jesus and you mean the one God sent to die for our sins and be raised from the dead so that we may have everlasting life through him, then I think you know who you're talking about, and I think God knows who you're talking about as well, and just because like you may disagree with the alphabet being used to pronounce his name, I feel like those are like legalistic modern confusion arguments to get people away from the faith. And I've heard rumors, and this is something like I talked to other big podcasters in the past, and I was told on good faith by a big podcaster they were offered money, and they'd refused, but they were offered money to push the Hebrew Israelite sacred name stuff. His real name is Yeshua, Jesus is a lie, and all that sort of stuff. They were actually offered money to start pushing that kind of narrative on their podcast.
Well,
and I don't trust any of it. I don't. I think the name Jesus actually is powerful, really powerful, and Iesous or whatever you want to use. And I think there's actually a real conspiracy right now to tarnish that name. I think it's the other way around.
I don't know. Yeah. We've talked about the JQ, the Jewish question, a lot in this show, of like how they're trying to subvert that, and like they don't believe Jesus even was their Messiah or die. Like the stuff they believe in the Talmud is pretty crazy. Like he's burning alive in his own semen and excrement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the people probably offering that money maybe had the last name like Goldstein or something.
Maybe, well, I don't know, but the Yeshua again, I think is actually comes from Jewish mysticism or Christian Kabbalah, which was introduced to the papacy like 400 years ago. The whole thing is really messed up, man. Like, and I would say don't quibble over the name. Just make sure you understand which Jesus it is you're praying to, and understand what the Bible tells you about Jesus, and then say, that's the one I mean. That's the guy, that's the one I want to pray to. But at the end of the day, you're supposed to pray to the Father in heaven, and it's through Jesus that you have this ability to have a relationship with him, which was prior impossible because there was no way to relate in a sense, and it's kind of, God only saw you as in sin. But through Jesus, he only sees his spotless son, thanks to his sacrifice. So he gives you that pathway to him because God is holy, and he can't be around sin. So it's kind of, that's the bridge, the gap has been bridged for us through Jesus, and that his son that was sent. So as long as you understand that, and there's no other name that will get you to the Father, but through him, then I think you're okay. And I think this argument over semantics is a huge confusion controlled operation right now in the truth movement. I really do. That's my personal view, and as someone who's been observing this for over a decade, yeah, that's my take.
Billy, move your mic a little closer to your face. It's fine.